December 12th, 1945. San Francisco Bay. Dawn broke cold and gray over the water. The transport ship USS Constellation cut through the fog, its engines thrumming low and steady beneath the deck. 147 Japanese women stood pressed together against the wind, their thin coats offering little protection from the December morning. Their faces showed nothing. No hope, no fear, just the blank emptiness of people who had already accepted their fate. They had been told Americans were monsters. They had been told to expect torture experiments, death. Now they were about to find out if any of it was true. Reiko Matsuda stood near the front of the group, her hands shaking inside her pockets. She was 24 years old. She had been a military nurse for 3 years. She had seen men die from infected wounds because there was no medicine. She had watched cities burn from the deck of evacuation ships. She had been taught that Americans showed no mercy to prisoners, that they experimented on captured Japanese like animals in laboratories, that death would come slowly and painfully. Behind her, someone whispered a prayer. Another woman wept silently, the sound barely audible over the wind and the crying of seagulls. The Golden Gate Bridge emerged from the mist ahead, towering impossibly high above them, its red cables vanishing into the fog like pathways to another world. Reiko stared at it and felt nothing. This was the moment they would die. This was where the experiments would begin. The bridge was just the gate to hell, painted red to hide the blood. The docks appeared through the fog. American soldiers lined the pier in neat rows. Their rifles rested on their shoulders. Their faces were blank, professional, revealing nothing. They stood perfectly still, waiting. The gangway lowered with a metallic clang that echoed across the water. An American voice called out in broken Japanese, the words awkward and slow. "Please line up. Follow the red line. Stay together." The women moved like ghosts, shuffling forward in a tight cluster, their feet echoing on the metal walkway. The cold December wind bit at their faces. Salt spray from the bay left a taste like tears on their lips. The smell of diesel fuel and seawater mixed with something else, something Reiko couldn't identify. American cigarettes, maybe. Coffee. Behind Reiko walked Fumiko Hayashi, a quiet woman who had served as a radio operator in Manila. Fumiko had been coughing for days on the ship, hiding it, pressing her sleeve to her mouth whenever the spasms came. Next to them, Chieko Watanabe gripped her Reiko's arm so tightly it hurt. Chieko was only 19, terrified, her breathing shallow and rapid. Bringing up the rear, Tomoe Yoshida moved with the dignity of her 42 years, trying to keep the younger women calm, even as her own hands trembled. They had been nurses, clerks, radio operators. They had served the Japanese military in the Philippines, performing their duties with the dedication their country demanded. Now they were prisoners. And as the dock drew closer, one thought filled every mind. This was the end. Reiko's medical training had taught her to observe, to notice details that others missed. She saw the way the American soldiers held their rifles relaxed, not ready to fire. She saw their faces, young men, mostly some of them barely older than Chieko. They didn't look angry. They didn't look cruel. They looked tired and cold and ready for their shift to end. But that meant nothing. She had been trained in Manila by officers who had shown her photographs, testimonies from soldiers who claimed to have witnessed American atrocities. They cut prisoners open while they were still alive to study how the body works. They injected diseases into healthy prisoners to test experimental cures. They showed no mercy, no compassion, no humanity. Death is preferable to capture. That was what the instructors had said. If you are taken prisoner, expect nothing but suffering. Pray for a quick death. That is the only mercy you will receive. And then Fumiko collapsed. She went down without warning. One moment she was walking, her feet shuffling along the dock behind Reiko. The next moment she was crumpled on the wooden planks, her body folded like paper, her breathing shallow and rapid. Reiko reached her first. She dropped to her knees, her hands moving with the automatic precision of her training. She pressed her palm against Fumiko's forehead and felt heat radiating from her skin like a furnace. Her lips were cracked and bloodless. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, seeing nothing. "I'm sorry," Fumiko breathed in Japanese. The words came out wet, bubbling. "I'm so sorry. I've been hiding it for days. I didn't want to slow anyone down." A cough racked her body. Blood appeared on her lips, bright red against the gray morning light. Reiko's training kicked in before her fear could stop her. Pneumonia, maybe worse. The fever was so high she could feel it without a thermometer. Days, maybe hours, not weeks. Fumiko Reiko whispered, dropping lower, so her face was close to her friend's burning cheek. Can you hear me? Stay with me. Just stay with me. Fumiko's eyes found hers for just a moment. I'm sorry, she said again. The other women surged forward instantly. They formed a circle around Fumiko's body, tight and protective, a human wall between their dying friend and the Americans. This was instinct. This was survival. When you are weak, when you are dying, the enemy will finish you. That was what they had been taught. That was what they believed with the certainty of gospel. The American soldiers noticed. Two of them started walking over their boots, heavy on the dock. The women's panic exploded like a bomb going off. Reiko stood up, spreading her arms wide, placing herself between the approaching soldiers and Fumiko's body. Stay back, she shouted in Japanese. Her voice came out hoarse, desperate. Stay back! The soldiers kept coming. Their faces showed concern, not anger. But the women saw only uniforms. Only the enemy approaching their dying friend. Don't touch her, Chieko screamed. The words came out in broken English. She had learned somewhere, phrases picked up from captured documents or borrowed from someone who had studied the language. She's dying, don't touch. More women took up the cry. Some in Japanese, some in fractured English, the words tumbling over each other. They pressed closer together, making their bodies into a wall, into a shield. They had no weapons. They had no strength. But they would not let the Americans take their friend. They would not let her die alone at enemy hands. The soldiers stopped. They looked at each other confused. One of them, a tall man with kind eyes and a crooked nose, held up his empty hands. We want to help, he said slowly, his voice gentle. Hospital. Doctor. Help. But the women did not believe him. How could they? They had been told stories. They had been warned. American kindness was a lie, told to make prisoners compliant before the real torture began. Fumiko coughed again. A wet, rattling sound came from deep in her chest. More blood appeared on her lips, running down her chin. Tomoe Yoshida, the oldest among them, was crying. Tears streamed down her weathered face. Please, she said in Japanese, her voice breaking. Please just let her die in peace. Don't hurt her anymore. No more pain. Please. For several long minutes, no one moved. The standoff held. The fog rolled across the dock in thick waves. Seagulls cried overhead, their calls harsh and mournful. The smell of the bay mixed with the smell of blood and fear. The wind carried the sound of the city beyond cars and voices, and the normal sounds of life continuing, while a woman lay dying on foreign soil. And then a new voice spoke, clear and perfect in Japanese. Let us help your friend. She has pneumonia. She needs medicine. We have medicine. The women turned as one. A man in a U.S. Army uniform was walking toward them. His face was Japanese. His features were unmistakable, the shape of his eyes, the structure of his cheekbones, the black hair cut military short. But his uniform was American, his insignia marking him as an officer. Behind him came two medics carrying a stretcher and a bag marked with a red cross. The cognitive dissonance hit Reiko like a physical blow. A Japanese face in an American uniform. It made no sense. It violated everything she understood about the world. My name is Lieutenant David Yamamoto, he said gently, stopping a respectful distance away. I'm a translator. I was born in California. My parents came from Hiroshima. He spoke Japanese the way Reiko's grandmother had spoken it, with the accent of the old country, formal and careful. Not the Japanese of Tokyo or Osaka, but something older, something that had been preserved across an ocean. Reiko stared at him. You're Japanese, she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Japanese-American, Yamamoto replied. Born in Sacramento. My parents emigrated in 1910. He took a step closer, his movements slow and deliberate, as if approaching frightened animals. I know what you're feeling. I know what you've been told. I know you were taught that we're monsters, that will hurt you, that capture means torture and death. His eyes found Reiko's and held them. But I promise you we don't hurt prisoners. Your friend needs help now or she will die. We have medicine, strong medicine, American medicine that can save her life. But you have to let us help. Reiko looked down at Fumiko. Her eyes were closing. Her breathing was becoming more shallow, more labored. The blood on her lips was drying to a dark crust. Every instinct Reiko had screamed danger. Every lesson she had learned said this was a trick, a trap, the beginning of something worse than death. But Fumiko was dying. Right now in front of her, her friend was dying. What if there was a chance? What if this one time the impossible was true? Let them through, Reiko said to the others. Her voice shook, but the words were clear. No, someone shouted from the back. They'll kill her. They'll experiment on her. She's already dying, Reiko said, and her voice broke on the words. If there's even a chance, even the smallest chance. The circle opened slowly. The women stepped back reluctant, their bodies tense and ready to surge forward again at the first sign of violence. The American medics moved through the gap carefully as if walking through a minefield. They knelt beside Fumiko. One of them opened his bag and took out a stethoscope. He pressed it against her chest, his face grave as he listened. He spoke to his partner in English words Reiko could not understand, rapid and professional. Medical terminology, she realized. He was assessing her condition. Then he pulled out a small glass bottle and a syringe. The women gasped. Several stepped forward again, hands outstretched as if to grab the medic. This was it. The injection, the experiment. The moment the torture began. Penicillin, Lieutenant Yamamoto said quickly, his voice cutting through the rising panic. It's medicine, very strong medicine. It fights infection. American soldiers use it too. It will help her breathe. The medic drew liquid from the bottle into the syringe with practiced precision. His hands were steady, confident. He had done this 1,000 times before. Medicine, Reiko heard herself say. For a prisoner, she's a human being, Yamamoto said simply. We treat human beings when they're sick. That's what medicine is for. The medic injected the medicine into Fumiko's arm. The needle went in clean and came out clean. Then he took out a canteen and carefully dribbled water onto her cracked lips. His movements were gentle, almost tender. He supported her head with one hand while giving her water with the other. Then he wrapped a thick wool blanket around her body. It looked warm. It looked new. It looked clean. We need to take her to the hospital now, Yamamoto said. The sooner we get her there, the better her chances. She'll get more medicine fluids, proper care. The medics lifted Fumiko onto the stretcher. They secured the blanket around her, tucking it carefully to keep out the wind. They began to carry her toward a waiting ambulance, white with a red cross painted on its side. Reiko started to follow, but Tomoe caught her arm. Where are they taking her? Tomoe asked Yamamoto. Can we go with her? She's going to the base hospital, Yamamoto said. You'll be processed first. You'll have medical examinations, showers, food. But I promise you, you'll see her again. And I promise you, she's in good hands. Reiko watched the ambulance doors close. The vehicle pulled away its engine, fading into the fog. She realized she was crying. Tears ran down her face, and she couldn't remember when they had started. A soldier gestured toward a bus parked nearby. This way, he said in broken Japanese. It's warm. You'll be safe. The women climbed onto the bus like sleepwalkers. The interior was heated. Warm air blasted from vents near the ceiling. After the cold of the ship and the dock, it felt almost painful, pins and needles spreading across cold skin. A young American soldier moved down the aisle, handing each woman a paper cup. His face was friendly, open. He couldn't have been more than 20. Reiko took hers without looking. Then the smell hit her. Chocolate. Rich, sweet, impossibly decadent. The scent filled her nose and her mouth watered involuntarily. She stared at the cup as if it might explode, as if this kindness might be poisoned. Next to her, Chieko was doing the same, holding her cup with trembling hands. What is it? Chieko whispered. Hot chocolate, Lieutenant Yamamoto said. He had boarded the bus behind them. It's a drink. Americans drink it in winter. It will warm you up. No one drank it first. They simply held their cups, watching the steam rise in delicate spirals. The bus began to move, pulling away from the dock, heading into the city. Finally, Midori Ashita, an older nurse who had survived the siege of Manila, raised her cup to her lips. She took a small sip. Her eyes widened. She took another sip, longer this time, and her face transformed. It's sweet, she said in wonder, her voice barely audible. It's so sweet. Reiko tried hers. The chocolate flooded her mouth, warm and impossibly rich. There was sugar in it, real sugar, something she had not tasted in years. During the war, there had been no sugar, no chocolate, barely any food at all. Toward the end, they had been eating rice mixed with sawdust to make it stretch further. And now the enemy was giving it to them for free. Around her, women were drinking. Some were crying into their cups, tears mixing with chocolate. The contradiction was unbearable. They had expected death. They had received hot chocolate. They had expected cruelty. They had received medicine for their dying friend. Nothing made sense anymore. The bus drove through San Francisco. The women pressed their faces to the windows like children staring at a world that should not exist. The city was alive. Lights blazed from every building, even though it was barely dawn. Cars filled the streets, more cars than Reiko had ever seen in one place. People walked on sidewalks, wearing bright clothes, carrying shopping bags, going about their morning routines as if war had never touched them. Because it hadn't. The realization hit Reiko with crushing force. America had never been bombed. While Japanese cities burned, while Tokyo and Osaka and Hiroshima became fields of ash and rubble, American cities had remained whole. Store windows displayed abundance that seemed obscene. A bakery passed by its window, full of cakes covered in white frosting and decorated with sugar flowers. Loaves of fresh bread lined the shelves. Mountains of fruit sat in pyramids of impossible color. Reiko stared at the cakes. In Japan, people were starving. Her mother, if she was still alive, was probably eating whatever she could find in the ruins of Osaka. And here the enemy had cakes. How Chieko whispered. Her breath fogged the window glass. How was all this still standing? Reiko did not answer. She couldn't. The gulf between her world and this world was too vast to bridge with words. The bus pulled through a gate topped with wire. The base spread out before them, rows of barracks painted white guard towers at the corners, fences running in straight lines. This looked more like what they had expected. This looked like a prison. But when they stepped off the bus, no one shouted. No one struck them. Soldiers simply directed them toward a building with hand gestures and simple words. This way, please. Single file. You'll be processed here. Inside, they were given forms, names, ages, jobs in the military ranks. A woman in uniform explained through a translator that this was just record keeping. They were not being interrogated, they were being documented. There was a difference, she said, though Reiko didn't fully understand what it meant. Then came medical examinations. Reiko's terror spiked again. She had heard stories about medical experiments, about vivisection, about diseases injected into healthy prisoners to test cures. But the doctor who examined her was a woman middle-aged with gentle hands and tired eyes. She checked Reiko's heart, her lungs, her reflexes. She looked in her throat and ears. She pressed on her abdomen, checking for tenderness. You're underweight, the doctor said through a translator, and you have vitamin deficiencies. Probably some parasites, but we'll fix that. You'll be eating regular meals here. 3 times a day. Regular meals, Reiko repeated. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Then came the showers. This was the moment many women feared most. Stories had circulated during the war about gas chambers disguised as showers, about prisoners told to undress for bathing, who were then killed with poison gas pumped through the pipes. When they were led into a tiled room with shower heads on the walls, several women began to cry. Others prayed quietly, their lips moving in silent mantras. But a young American nurse blonde with a kind smile demonstrated the showers herself. She turned on the water. She let it run over her hands, over her arms. She showed them it was just water. Clear, clean, hot. It's safe, Lieutenant Yamamoto translated. It's just for washing. There's soap and shampoo. Take your time. Reiko stepped under the hot water. For a moment, she could not breathe. The heat was shocking after months of cold. She had not had a hot shower in 8 months. On the ship, they had washed with cold seawater that left their skins sticky and their hair stiff. Before that, in the holding camp in Manila, only a trickle of rusty water from a pipe. She took the bar of soap. It was white and clean, smelling faintly of flowers she couldn't name. American flowers. She washed her hair with shampoo, scrubbing at months of salt and dirt and fear. The water running off her body was brown at first, then gradually clear. Around her, other women were washing. Some were crying. Others were laughing, an almost hysterical sound that echoed off the tile walls. After the showers came clean clothes. Not prison uniforms, but simple cotton dresses and sweaters. The clothes were worn but clean. They fit reasonably well. They were given socks, underwear, sturdy shoes without holes. Reiko caught her reflection in a mirror and didn't recognize herself. Clean, warm, almost human again. Then came dinner. They were led to a mess hall, a large building with long tables and fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. The smell hit Reiko before she entered. Meat, vegetables, bread, real food cooked and hot and plentiful. The serving line was strange. You took a tray and walked along a counter. Kitchen workers put food on your plate. Reiko watched the woman ahead of her receive a piece of chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, a roll, and a slice of apple pie. When her turn came, she received the same. She sat down with Chieko and Tomoe. They all stared at their trays. The portion was more food than Reiko had seen on a single plate in 2 years. Is it poison? Someone whispered from a nearby table. If they wanted to poison us, Tomoe said quietly, why bother with the examination and the showers? Why waste the medicine on Fumiko? I think it might actually be safe, she added, though her voice held uncertainty. Reiko picked up her fork. Her hands shook. She cut a small piece of chicken and put it in her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue. Salty, savory, rich with fat. She chewed slowly, almost reverently. Then she began to cry. She could not help it. The food was so good. She was so hungry. And nothing about this made sense. None of it matched what she had been taught, what she had been promised, what she had been told to expect. Across from her, Chieko was crying, 2 tears running down her face as she ate. Around them, throughout the mess hall, women wept into their food. That night, they were taken to barracks. The building was wooden, painted white with rows of bunk beds. Each bed had sheets, a pillow, 2 blankets. The building was heated. There were windows with curtains. Reiko climbed into her bunk and pulled the blankets to her chin. The mattress was thin but clean. The pillow was soft. She lay in the dark, listening to the other women breathing and whispering. Are we really prisoners? Someone asked. This doesn't feel like prison. I don't know what this is, another voice answered. But I'm warm, and I'm clean, and I'm not hungry. For the first time in years, I'm not hungry. Reiko closed her eyes, but sleep would not come. Her mind kept returning to Fumiko. Was she alive? Was she being treated well? Or had the kindness on the dock been a trick, a performance for the other prisoners, while Fumiko was taken somewhere dark for experiments? But deeper than that, worry was another thought, more disturbing, more dangerous. If they're going to kill us, she thought, why feed us chocolate first? Why give us hot showers and clean beds? Why waste medicine on a dying prisoner? And if they're not going to kill us, if this kindness is real, then everything we believe was a lie. Everything we were taught, everything we fought for. That possibility was more terrifying than any torture could have been. Because if the enemy was capable of mercy, of compassion, of treating prisoners like human beings, then what did that say about her own government? What did it say about the war itself? Reiko lay in the dark, warm and clean and fed, and felt the first crack form in the wall of certainty she had built around her beliefs. A small crack barely visible. But once formed, it would only grow wider. Outside, an American flag snapped in the wind, its stars and stripes barely visible in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more contradictions, more impossible kindness. But tonight, for the first time in months, Reiko Matsuda was not afraid of dying. She was afraid of something far worse. She was afraid that everything she had ever known might be wrong. A bell rang at 6 in the morning, sharp and insistent. Reiko woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the softness of the pillow beneath her head, the warmth of the blankets over her body. For a brief, confused moment, she thought she was back in Osaka in her childhood bedroom. Then memory returned. The dock, Fumiko collapsing, the American medics, the hot chocolate, all of it real. Around her, other women were stirring, climbing down from bunks, their movements slow and uncertain. No one had slept well. Too many contradictions to process. Too many fears still unresolved. They were led to the mess hall for breakfast. The smell of food hit Reiko before she entered. Oatmeal, she realized. Toast. Coffee. The scent was so rich, so wholesome, it made her dizzy. The serving line worked the same as dinner. Workers placed food on her tray without asking, without judgment. A bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar and raisins already mixed in. 2 slices of toast with butter, a glass of milk, a cup of coffee. Reiko sat with Chieko and Tomoe again. They ate in silence, each woman lost in her own thoughts. The oatmeal was warm and sweet. The toast was soft, the butter melting into it. The coffee was bitter but good, reminding Reiko of better times, of mornings before the war, when such small luxuries had seemed ordinary. After breakfast, Lieutenant Yamamoto entered the mess hall. The room quieted immediately. "Good morning," he said in Japanese. "I hope you all slept well. Today we'll be assigning you to work details. This is required under the Geneva Convention. All prisoners of war who are physically able must be given work appropriate to their rank and abilities." The women exchanged glances. Work. That made sense. Prisoners worked. But what came next did not. "You will be paid for your work," Yamamoto continued. "Small amounts, but compensation nonetheless. The Geneva Convention requires it. You can use the money to purchase personal items from the commissary. Soap, writing paper, small comforts. Paid." Chieko whispered to Reiko, "They're going to pay us." Reiko had no answer. Nothing about this matched what she understood about captivity. "Work assignments are as follows," Yamamoto said, consulting a clipboard. "Laundry detail, kitchen assistance, groundskeeping, clerical work. We'll match you to tasks based on your skills and physical condition." Reiko found herself assigned to the laundry. A sergeant led her and 6 other women across the base to a large building that smelled of soap and steam. Inside, rows of washing machines churned, dryers tumbled. American women worked alongside a few soldiers, folding endless piles of sheets and uniforms. One of the American women looked up as they entered. She was older, perhaps 50, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and hands that showed years of hard work. Her face was kind, her eyes curious but not unkind. "You must be the new girl," she said in English. Lieutenant Yamamoto, who had accompanied them, translated. "This is Mrs. Margaret Sullivan. You'll be working with her. She'll show you what to do." "Maggie," the woman said, tapping her chest. "Just call me Maggie." Over the next hour, Maggie demonstrated the work through gestures and simple words. Take sheets from dryer. Fold. Stack. Repeat. The work was hot, the air thick with humidity, but it was not difficult. Not cruel. Just work. Reiko found herself at a folding table next to Maggie. They worked in silence, at first the rhythm of folding, creating a kind of meditation. Smooth the sheet. Fold in half again. Stack. After perhaps 30 minutes, Maggie pulled a photograph from her apron pocket. She held it out to Reiko, pointing. "My son," she said. "Patrick." Reiko looked at the photograph. A young man in an American Army uniform smiling at the camera. He had Maggie's eyes, kind and open. "Japan," Maggie said, pointing at the photo, then gesturing vaguely east. "He there." "Occupation." She put her hand over her heart, her face showing worry that needed no translation. Reiko understood. She thought of her own brother dead on Okinawa. She thought of all the sons and brothers and fathers lost to this war. "I understand," she said in careful English words she had learned from somewhere, perhaps school before the war. "My brother. Died. Okinawa." Maggie's face crumpled with compassion. She reached out and touched Reiko's arm, a brief gesture of shared grief. "I'm sorry," she said. "So sorry." They returned to folding in silence, but something had shifted. A bridge built from 2 small words. "I'm sorry." At lunch, the women gathered in the mess hall again. Sandwiches this time. Ham and cheese on soft white bread. An apple. A cookie. More food than Reiko had seen in a single day during the last year of the war. After lunch, Lieutenant Yamamoto made another announcement. "Some of you have asked about Fumiko Hayashi," he said. "I have good news. She's improving. The penicillin is working. Her fever has broken. She's breathing normally. The doctor says she'll make a full recovery." Relief swept through the room like a wave. Women who had been holding their breath for hours finally exhaled. Reiko felt tears prick her eyes. "You may visit her?" Yamamoto continued. "A small group at a time. Tomorrow afternoon if you'd like." The next day, Reiko was among the first group taken to the base hospital. The building was clean and bright, nothing like the field hospital she had worked in during the war. Nurses moved efficiently through hallways that smelled of disinfectant and floor wax. Fumiko was in a ward with 6 beds. She sat propped up on pillows, an intravenous line still running into her arm. But her face had color again. Her eyes were clear. "Reiko," she said, her voice weak but genuine. "You're here." Reiko sat in the chair beside the bed and took Fumiko's hand. "You're alive," she said. "You're really alive." "The penicillin," Fumiko said, wonder in her voice. "It works so fast. One day I was dying. The next day I could breathe again." The doctors here, they've been so kind. They check on me every few hours. They bring me juice and soup. They helped me write a letter to my mother, through the Red Cross. She should know I'm alive, that I survived. Reiko squeezed her friend's hand, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The weeks began to blur together into a routine that felt increasingly surreal. Wake at 6, breakfast in the mess hall, work in the laundry, lunch, more work, dinner, free time in the evening, lights out at 10. The work in the laundry became almost comfortable. Maggie taught Reiko more English words. Sheet, towel, hot, cold. Good morning. Thank you. Simple things, but each word felt like a small act of rebellion against everything Reiko had been taught about Americans. One day, Maggie brought a magazine to work. Life magazine with photographs of American families. She pointed to pictures teaching Reiko words. House, car, dog, family. She showed Reiko a picture of a woman in a kitchen, smiling as she pulled a cake from an oven. My house, Maggie said, pointing to herself, then the picture. Before war, I work now. Money for Patrick. She mimed a soldier, then pointed east again. Japan. Reiko looked at the magazine at the houses and cars in abundance in every photograph and felt the cognitive dissonance grow stronger. This was the enemy, these people with their neat houses and smiling families and cakes and ovens. In the evenings, a young corporal named Anderson taught basic English to any women who wanted to learn. He was patient, cheerful, barely 20 years old. He wrote words on a chalkboard and had them repeat. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good night. Please. Thank you. You're welcome. How are you? I am fine. Some women refused to attend. To learn the enemy's language felt like betrayal. But others, including Reiko, found themselves drawn to these lessons. Knowledge was survival. Understanding the guards, the rules, the system around them might keep them alive. And deeper than that, though Reiko would not admit it even to herself, was curiosity. Who were these people, these Americans who treated prisoners with medicine and food and language lessons? Then in late January, the letters arrived. Mail call Lieutenant Yamamoto announced one morning after breakfast. The Red Cross has delivered letters from Japan. I'll call your names. The room erupted in noise. Letters, news from home, proof that someone somewhere still remembered them. Yamamoto began calling names. One by one, women came forward to receive thin envelopes, their hands trembling as they took them. Chieko Watanabe, Yamamoto called. Chieko practically ran to the front. She took the envelope and returned to her seat, tearing it open with shaking hands. Reiko watched her friend's face as she read. Joy first, then confusion, then something that looked like pain. Chieko looked up, her eyes finding Reiko's. My family, she whispered. They're alive, but they're starving. She read aloud, her voice breaking on the words. Dearest Chieko, we received word through the Red Cross that you are alive and a prisoner in America. We thank Buddha every day. We eat scraps when we can find them. Father is sick with a terrible cough. There are no doctors here anymore. No medicine. The city is ash. Everything is gone. We heard that Americans execute all prisoners. We prayed for your soul. We are grateful you survived whatever they did to you. Please come home soon if they allow it. Your loving mother. The mess hall had gone quiet. Other women were reading their own letters, faces showing similar pain. Reiko Matsuda Yamamoto called. Reiko's letter was from her mother. The handwriting was shakier than she remembered, the characters less precise. She read it once quickly, then again more slowly. My dearest daughter, the Red Cross informed us you are alive. I have wept with joy for 2 days. We have so little food. I eat once a day, sometimes less. The neighbors share what they can, but there is never enough. Our house is half destroyed. I live in 2 rooms that still have a roof. Winter is very cold. I have 1 blanket. Please tell me they are not hurting you. Please tell me you are surviving. I pray every day for your return, your loving mother. Reiko set the letter down carefully. Her hands were shaking. Around her, women were crying, some quietly, tears sliding down their faces. Others openly, shoulders shaking with sobs. Reiko looked at her breakfast tray. She had left half a piece of toast. The oatmeal bowl still had a few bites in it. She had been full. She had stopped eating because she was full, while her mother ate once a day. While Chieko's father died of a cough that penicillin could cure, while families across Japan starved and froze and lived in ruins. She pushed the tray away, suddenly nauseated. That night, no one spoke much in the barracks. The letters had broken something open, a wound that had been waiting beneath the surface. Finally, in the darkness, Tomo spoke. How can we eat when they're starving? No one answered at first. The question hung in the air, heavy and impossible. We can't help them by starving ourselves. Midori finally said, we're prisoners. We have no control over this. But we're eating better than we did before the war, someone else said. Better than we ever ate in the military. While they have nothing. What are we supposed to do? Chieko asked, her voice thick with tears. Refuse the food they'll force feed us. Or just let us waste away. It won't help our families either way. Reiko lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling. The guilt was crushing, a physical weight on her chest. Every meal felt like betrayal. Every comfortable moment, every warm shower, every clean sheet was purchased with the suffering of people she loved. I don't know how to live with this, she whispered to the darkness. None of us do, Tomo replied. But maybe that's the point. Maybe this is what war really is. Not just the battles and the bombs, but this, the impossible choices, the guilt that doesn't end even when the fighting stops. Over the following days, the guilt settled over the women like a fog. Some stopped eating full meals, pushing food around their plates. Others wept during dinner. A few became withdrawn, speaking to no one. Maggie noticed. She couldn't read the letters, couldn't understand the Japanese words being whispered in corners. But she saw the change in Reiko, the way her hands moved more slowly at the folding table, the way her eyes had gone distant. One day, Maggie brought Reiko a cup of coffee during their break. She set it down gently in front of her, then sat down across the table. Letter, she asked, miming writing, then pointing to Reiko's heart. Reiko nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her own letter, worn from being read many times. She handed it to Reiko, pointing at the English words, even though she knew Reiko couldn't read them. Patrick, she said. She pointed at a paragraph and her voice caught. He says Japan is very bad. Cities destroyed, people hungry, children. Her eyes filled with tears. He gives them his food. The children. He can't watch them starve. She looked at Reiko directly. War is terrible. For everyone. Reiko understood. They were the same, she and Maggie, both worrying about family in hostile territory. Both guilty for having when others had not. Both trapped in a war that had already ended, but somehow continued in their hearts. In late February, Lieutenant Yamamoto made an unusual announcement. We're going to show you something today. Something important. It's going to be difficult to watch, but it's crucial that you understand why we treat prisoners the way we do. The women were led to a recreation building they had never entered before. Inside, chairs had been set up facing a white screen. A film projector sat in the back of the room. This is footage, Yamamoto said, his voice heavy, that was taken by Allied forces when they liberated camps in Germany. Concentration camps. What you're about to see is disturbing. Some of you may want to look away, but I ask you to watch, to understand. The lights dimmed, the projector started, and for the next 12 minutes, Reiko watched horror unfold on the screen. Skeletal bodies stacked like firewood. Living prisoners who barely looked human. Their eyes hollow, their skins stretched over bones. Mass graves being excavated by bulldozers. Gas chambers with scratch marks on the walls. Ovens built for burning human bodies. Mountains of shoes, of glasses of human hair. Several women were crying. Others had covered their faces. Reiko watched, unable to look away, her medical training forcing her to see the details. The signs of starvation, the evidence of systematic murder. The scale of it, the industrial efficiency of death. When the lights came up, no one spoke. The silence was absolute. Lieutenant Yamamoto stood at the front of the room. This is what happens when you decide some people aren't human. When you decide that your enemies don't deserve dignity or mercy. This is what Nazi Germany did to Jews, to political prisoners, to Roma, to anyone they decided was less than human. He paused, letting them absorb it. This is why America follows the Geneva Convention. Why we treat prisoners, even enemy prisoners, as human beings with rights. Because we have seen what happens when you don't. Because we believe every human life has value, even in war, especially in war. The women filed out slowly, stunned. They returned to the barracks in silence. The women filed out slowly, stunned. As they walked back to the barracks, Reiko found herself beside Lieutenant Yamamoto. He walked with his hands clasped behind his back, his face drawn. "Lieutenant," she said carefully in halting English. "Why you show us this?" He stopped walking. For a long moment he was silent, staring at the ground. "Because I know what it is to be seen as an enemy," he said, finally switching to Japanese. "My family, when the war started, they were sent to a camp, Manzanar, in the California desert. A camp Reiko's breath caught. Like those camps we just saw numb. Not like those, but still a camp. Fences, guards. They were American citizens, born in California like me. But they had Japanese faces. So they were taken from their homes, their businesses, everything." He looked at her directly. "I was already in the army, a translator. They let me serve because they needed Japanese speakers. But my parents, my sisters, they spent 3 years behind wire, in their own country, because people were afraid, because they forgot that being Japanese American doesn't mean being the enemy." Reiko felt tears on her face. "I'm sorry." Yamamoto shook his head. "Don't be sorry. Just understand. America isn't perfect. We make mistakes, big ones. But we're trying to be better. That's why we follow the Geneva Convention. That's why we show you those films. So you understand that we've seen what hatred does. And we're choosing something different." He gestured toward the barracks. "Go, your friends are waiting. Think about what you saw tonight. Think about what it means." Reiko watched him walk away. This man caught between two worlds, serving a country that had imprisoned his family, treating enemy prisoners with more kindness than his own government had shown his parents. She understood then why he had been so gentle on the dock that first day, why he spoke to them with such care. He knew what it was like to be seen as the enemy when you were just trying to survive. That night, the conversation lasted until dawn. "Does anyone else feel like we were lied to?" Chieko finally whispered into the darkness. "Yes," came a chorus of soft voices. "They told us Americans were devils," Midori said. "They told us to expect torture. And instead, they gave us medicine and food," someone else added. "The footage we saw tonight," Tomoe said carefully. "That was real. Those were Allied cameras. American soldiers found those camps." A long silence followed. "If they lied about Americans," Reiko heard herself say, "what else did they lie about?" The question hung in the air like smoke, dangerous and impossible to ignore. "I heard stories," Tomoe continued, her voice barely audible, "from soldiers who had been in China, about what happened in Nanking. I didn't want to believe them. Those were enemy lies," someone protested weakly. "Propaganda. Were they?" Tomoe asked. "How do we know? We believed what we were told about Americans, and we were wrong." "What else were we wrong about?" Another long silence, the weight of realization settling over them like snow. "What do we do with this?" Chieko asked. "When we go home, what do we say?" "Don't know," Reiko said. "But I know this. I can never unknow what I've learned here. I can never unsee what I saw tonight. And I can never forget how the enemy treated me." "That's the real prison," Tomoe said quietly, knowing the truth but not being able to speak it. In the weeks that followed, life at the base continued its strange routine. The women worked, ate, slept. They attended English lessons. They wrote careful letters home saying nothing about the abundance around them, nothing about the kindness they received. Reiko's friendship with Maggie deepened in the way friendships do when words are scarce but presence is constant. They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Maggie taught her more English. Reiko learned to laugh at Maggie's jokes even when she didn't fully understand them. One day in March, Maggie brought photographs from home. Her house in Sacramento, her garden before the war, Patrick as a little boy. She pointed to the garden photo with pride. "Tomatoes," she said. "Beans. I grow." Then she pointed to Patrick. "Big now," she said, gesturing tall. "Man, but always my baby." She looked at Reiko with sudden intensity. "War is stupid," she said in careful English. "Makes mothers afraid." Reiko nodded. "Yes," she said. "Stupid." They went back to folding sheets, two women on opposite sides of history, connected by something as simple as worry and work and the rhythms of laundry. Spring came to San Francisco. The women were allowed outside during free time, walking the grounds within the fenced areas. The air smelled of growing things. Flowers bloomed in beds maintained by other prisoners. Life continuing, despite everything. Reiko walked with Fumiko, who had been released from the hospital and was now working in the kitchen. They spoke little, just enjoyed the sun on their faces. "I've been thinking," Fumiko said finally, "about going home, about what we'll say." Reiko waited. "We can't tell them the truth, can we?" Fumiko continued. "About how well we were treated. They'll think we collaborated or that we're lying to make ourselves feel better about surviving." "No," Reiko agreed. "We can't tell them. So we carry it alone. This strange truth." They walked in silence for a while longer. "Yes," Reiko finally said. "We carry it alone." The announcement came on a morning in late May. Lieutenant Yamamoto entered the mess hall after breakfast, his face more serious than usual. The women quieted immediately, sensing the weight of whatever news he carried. "I have important news," he said in Japanese. "The repatriation process is beginning. You'll be returning to Japan starting next month." The room erupted. Some women cried out in joy. Others sat in stunned silence. Chieko grabbed Reiko's hand so tightly it hurt. Going home. After 6 months, they were finally going home. But as the initial wave of emotion passed, a different feeling settled over the room. Fear, uncertainty, dread. What would they be going home to? What would be left? That night, the women gathered in the barracks after lights out. They spoke in whispers, their voices barely audible in the darkness. "When we get home," Tomoe said carefully, "what do we tell them about this place? About how we were treated?" "The truth," Chieko suggested, but her voice held no conviction. "No," the word came from multiple voices at once. "They'll think we're lying," Reiko said, "or worse. They'll think we collaborated, that we did something shameful to earn this treatment. They'll say we betrayed Japan," Midori added, "that we were too weak to resist American propaganda." "But we didn't do anything wrong," Chieko protested. "We were just prisoners. We didn't choose any of this." "That won't matter," Tomoe said, her voice heavy. "In Japan right now, people are starving. Cities are rubble. And we're going to return looking healthy, well-fed, wearing American clothes. They'll see betrayal even if there was none." "So we just don't talk about it?" someone asked. "What choice do we have?" Reiko said. "We tell them we survived. We tell them we were treated according to international law. But the details, the kindness, the abundance, that stays here." One by one, murmurs of agreement rippled through the darkness. An unspoken pact forming among women who had learned too much, who carried a truth too dangerous to speak. The final weeks passed in a blur of preparations and farewells. Reiko's last shifts in the laundry felt weighted with significance. Every folded sheet a small goodbye. Maggie worked beside her in silence, both women aware that something was ending. Finally, on the last day, Maggie set down the sheet she was folding and looked at Reiko with tears in her eyes. "I'm gonna miss you," she said in simple English that Reiko now understood perfectly. "I will miss you too," Reiko replied, her English still halting, but clear. Maggie laughed through her tears. "War makes us enemies, but we are friends. Strange world." "Yes," Reiko said. "Strange world. Good friends." The base held a farewell gathering on the final evening. The mess hall was decorated with both American and Japanese flags hanging side by side, a gesture that 6 months ago would have seemed impossible. Long tables held more food than seemed necessary, as if abundance could somehow make the goodbye easier. Lieutenant Yamamoto gave a speech. "You have shown dignity and resilience during your time here. You've taught us that even enemies can find common ground. We wish you well in rebuilding your lives and your country." He paused. "Some of you learned English here. Some of us learned Japanese. But more importantly, we learned something about humanity, about the choice to see each other as people first, enemies second. I hope you carry that home with you." After the speeches, Maggie pulled Reiko aside to a quiet corner. She pressed a package into Reiko's hands, wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "For Journey," she said, "and after." Reiko's hands trembled as she unwrapped it. Inside lay treasures that would have seemed mundane 6 months ago, but now felt precious beyond measure. 4 Hershey chocolate bars, a box of saltine crackers, a pocket English-Japanese dictionary, its pages worn from use, clearly Maggie's own, and folded at the bottom a handwritten note. Reiko read it slowly, her English now good enough to understand most of it. "Dear Reiko, you are a good person. I know that now. I wish I knew before war make us enemies. War is over. Maybe now we can all try to be better humans. This dictionary, use it. Maybe one day you write me. Maybe one day we live in a world where that is possible. Take care of yourself. Tell your mother you are alive. That is all that matters. Your friend Maggie Sullivan. P.S. The chocolate is for you. The crackers are for your mother. Tell her they are from Irish lady in California who understands hungry. Reiko looked up at Maggie, her vision blurred with tears. She couldn't speak. The words were trapped behind the lump in her throat. Maggie pulled her into an embrace, fierce and protective. I know, she whispered. I know. You remind me of Patrick, Maggie continued. Good heart. War didn't break that. Don't let what comes next break it either. Thank you, Reiko managed, for everything, for kindness. Maggie pressed a slip of paper into her hand. My address, Sacramento. If you can write if it is safe, I will wait. However long I wait. They held each other for a long moment, two women who should have been enemies who had become something far more precious. Remember, Maggie whispered, enemies is what they told us to be. Friends is what we chose to be. Don't forget. The USS General M.C. Meigs left San Francisco on a gray June morning. The voyage took 12 days of increasing anxiety as they drew closer to a homeland many feared to see. Reiko stood on deck as they approached Yokohama. She had not opened the chocolate. She had not touched the crackers. They felt too precious, as if opening them would break some spell. The devastation was visible before they reached the dock. Buildings stood as skeletal remains. Entire blocks had been reduced to rubble. Smoke still rose from fires that had never been fully extinguished. I knew it would be bent, Chieko whispered beside her, but Japanese officials processed them at the dock, their faces hard and suspicious. Where were you held? How were you treated? San Francisco, Reiko said. We were treated according to international law. We survived. The official studied her face. You look well. Well fed. The implication hung in the air. What did you do to earn that? I worked in the laundry, Reiko said flatly. We were paid small amounts as required by the Geneva Convention. The train to Osaka took 8 hours through countryside that looked torn apart. Fields lay fallow. Villages were half destroyed. People through the windows looked like ghosts. Inside the train car, passengers stared at Reiko and the other women. Their eyes took in the clean dresses, the sturdy shoes, the obvious health. Prisoners, someone whispered. American prisoners. Collaborators, another voice added. Osaka was worse than Reiko had imagined. The city of her childhood had been transformed into nightmare. Entire neighborhoods were simply gone. The castle was damaged. Everything was ash. Her family home was half collapsed. The front wall had been blown away, leaving the interior exposed. Her mother lived in 2 back rooms. Mother, Reiko called. Mother, it's me. A figure appeared so thin, Reiko almost didn't recognize her. Her mother had aged 20 years. Her face was gaunt, her hair gray, her body bent. Then her eyes widened. Reiko, her voice broke. Reiko, they met in what had once been the living room. Her mother's embrace was desperate. She was so thin Reiko could feel every bone. You're alive. You're alive. I'm home, Mother. Her mother pulled back, studying Reiko's face. How did you survive? Where were you? I was a prisoner in America, San Francisco. Her mother's face changed. They didn't harm you, no. They treated us according to the Geneva Convention. Her mother's eyes traveled down Reiko's body, taking in the evidence. The healthy weight, the clean skin. You look well. The words should have been joyful. Instead, they sounded accusatory. Too well. Reiko felt the sting but understood. While she had eaten chicken, her mother had starved. I brought you something. She pulled out the crackers. A woman in California wanted you to have these. She said to tell you she understands hunger. Her mother took them with trembling hands. American food. My daughter brings me American food. The next day, neighbor women came. Their faces were polite, but their eyes were hard. You survived American captivity. How fortunate. You look so healthy. The Americans must have treated you well. What did you have to do, Reiko-san, to receive such treatment? The implications were clear. After they left, her mother spoke quietly. Perhaps it's best not to speak too much of America. People are suspicious. Reiko nodded. She was beginning to understand that the silence was not just about protecting herself. It was about protecting others from a truth they could not bear. That Japan had lost so completely. That American abundance was so vast. That the enemy had shown more mercy than their own government could provide. She encountered other former prisoners in the following weeks. They looked worse than her group, emaciated, broken. One asked where Reiko had been held. When she answered San Francisco, the woman's face hardened. I heard they treated prisoners well there. Propaganda, I'm sure, to make us look weak. Reiko said nothing. She was learning that her truth had no place here. At night, she hid Maggie's dictionary under a loose floorboard. She couldn't risk being seen with it. But first, she read the note by candlelight. You are a good person. The war is over. Maybe now we can all try to be better humans. She cried silently. She thought of Fumiko and Chieko, and Tomoe wondered where they were if they too were facing this silence. They had escaped one prison only to enter another. The prison of truth, too dangerous to speak. 20 years passed. Japan rebuilt itself with astonishing speed. The occupation ended. The two nations became allies. But Reiko never spoke of those 6 months. She married and had a daughter named Akiko. Her husband died in 1960. She worked as a nurse, never mentioning where she had practiced. She kept Maggie's note hidden for 2 decades, reading it in secret. The chocolate had been eaten long ago in small pieces. The crackers had sustained her mother for a week. The dictionary she used in private, maintaining her English in secret. And she never wrote to Maggie. The fear was too great. What if someone questioned why she was corresponding with an American woman? She remained silent year after year, carrying a truth that grew heavier. Then one evening in 1906, her daughter came home with homework about World War II. Akiko was 16, bright, growing up in a Japan so different, it felt like a different country. Mother, you were in the war, weren't you? You were a military nurse. Yes. What was it like being captured by Americans? Reiko's instinct was to deflect, but she looked at her daughter's face and something broke. Come here, sit. I want to tell you something I've never told anyone. And for the first time in 20 years, Reiko spoke the truth. She told her daughter everything. The fog on San Francisco Bay, Fumiko collapsing, Lieutenant Yamamoto, the penicillin, the hot chocolate, the showers they feared were gas chambers, the meals while families starved, the clean beds, working with Maggie, the guilt, the Holocaust footage, the questions it raised, the all-night conversation. Finally, she went to the floorboard and pulled out Maggie's note. She handed it to Akiko. Akiko read slowly, her eyes widening. Mother, the Americans treated you with kindness, yes, and you couldn't tell anyone because they would think you were a traitor. Yes, Akiko was quiet. That must have been so lonely. The simple understanding broke something in Reiko. She began to cry, really cry for the first time since saying goodbye to Maggie. Her daughter held her. When the tears subsided, Akiko pulled back. Mother, I was going to tell you tonight anyway. She reached into her school bag. I've been accepted, exchange student program, to California. Reiko's heart stopped. California, Sacramento. I'll be studying there next year, near where your friend Maggie lived. Fear, pride, and hope flooded through Reiko. Maybe I'll understand what you experienced, Akiko said softly. In a different way. Maybe I can be a bridge. Reiko held her daughter's hands. Be careful, but also be open. Let them surprise you, like they surprised me. That night, Reiko made a decision. She took out paper and began to write in careful English. It took 3 nights. Then she addressed an envelope to the Sacramento address from 21 years ago, hoping desperately it was still valid. She mailed it before she could lose courage. 4 months later, a letter arrived from America. The handwriting was older, but unmistakably Maggie's. Dear Reiko, I don't know if you will receive this, but I have to I've thought of you often over these 25 years. My son Patrick came home from Japan in 1948. He married a Japanese woman he met during the occupation. Her name is Yuki. They gave me grandchildren. I have Japanese grandchildren, Reiko. Isn't that something? The war made us enemies, but peace made us family. The letter said yes, of course they could still be friends. That friendship did not have an expiration date, that she had kept Reiko's memory alive, wondering, hoping, waiting, and that she would very much like to meet Reiko's daughter. Reiko cried again, but this time the tears were relief, the beginning of freedom from silence. She began to write back immediately, and this time she did not stop. Over the next years, letters traveled across the Pacific, monthly then weekly. Maggie sent photos of Patrick's family of grandchildren who were half American and half Japanese. Reiko sent photos of Akiko's graduation of rebuilt Osaka. They built a bridge made of paper and ink and stubborn refusal to let war define them. Akiko spent a year in Sacramento and visited Maggie many times. She came home with stories of an old Irish woman who cried when they met, who held her hands and said, "You look so much like your mother did." Slowly, carefully, Reiko began to speak more openly about her experience. Not loudly, not publicly, but in small ways with people ready to hear. Over the years, Reiko learned what happened to the others. Fumiko had returned to Kyoto, married, became a teacher. She never spoke of San Francisco either. Chieko had struggled the most guilt following her into adult life. Tomoe had died in 1958, taking her silence to the grave. They had all carried the same burden, each alone with truth too dangerous to share. On quiet evenings, Reiko would sit at her desk with Maggie's dictionary and compose letters. The same desk, but now the window looked out on a city reborn, a world where former enemies sent photos of grandchildren. She would think back to that cold December morning, to standing on that dock, certain she was about to the moment everything she believed was proven wrong. They had told her Americans were monsters. They had been wrong. They had told her she was the enemy, but she had been just a person, just a human being. And so had they. The war had tried to make her hate, but kindness had been stronger than propaganda. Mercy had been stronger than fear. And friendship, it turned out, was stronger than anything war could build. She picked up her pen. "Dear Maggie," she started, like she had started 100 letters before. "Let me tell you what happened this week." And in the act of writing and the sharing of small truths and daily moments, Reiko Matsuda finally found the freedom she had been seeking for nearly 3 decades. The freedom to be honest. The freedom to remember both pain and kindness. The freedom to carry complex truth without shame. The freedom to be, at last, simply herself. Not a prisoner, not an enemy, not a keeper of dangerous secrets. Just a woman who had learned that mercy exists even in war. That people are capable of choosing kindness even when everything tells them to choose hate. That friendship can survive anything, even silence, even time, even the vast ocean between California and Japan. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak a truth no one wants to hear. Even if it takes 20 years to find the courage. Even if the truth is simply this: the enemy was kind to me, and I have never forgotten.